Good morning and welcome back. This is World Talks coming to you live from Warsaw. Kosovo is voting in yet another election this Sunday, the third in less than a year and a half. The vote comes as political leaders remain unable to break a long-running deadlock over the formation of stable institutions. The vote is being shaped by a clash between former allies, Prime Minister Albin Kurti and former President Vjosa Osmani, stalled talks with Serbia and continued obstacles to EU integration. To discuss this all, I'm joined now by Drilon Gashi, Chief of Mission at the Consulate General of Kosovo here in Warsaw. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
So today's vote is marked not only by the unusual competition between rival parties, but also by the collapse of one of the country's most important political alliances in recent years, that between Albin Kurti, the Prime Minister since 2021, and former President Vjosa Osmani. So can you explain what happened and what led to their split, so to speak?
If I may say first for your viewers, as you rightly pointed out, this is another set of elections in Kosovo, but I'll emphasize we are excellent at holding elections, although we've held them much too often, and unfortunately we haven't come to agreement as much as we should following elections. And so I think today's competition between Prime Minister Albin Kurti's party, Vetëvendosje, and now former President Osmani's party, LDK, is prominent. However, LDK is likely to come into third place, so following PDK's result as second place. So even though the former president has now entered politics, it appears as so, based on most recent polling, that that the results won't be too different from those on December 28th, which resulted in a win for Prime Minister Albin Kurti and Vetëvendosje. But what I hope is different, and what I hope can actually surprise folks, is that there is agreement after the elections are out between the likely, Prime Minister-elect Albin Kurti and either Madam Vjosa Osmani's party, now LDK, or PDK. I think because this is the third snap election in a period of about 18 months, I believe the parties themselves are looking to come to an agreement after having not done so on several instances. But I also think, even more importantly, their voters will not probably tolerate another election after this one.
Okay, so as you've mentioned, third parliamentary election in less than a year and a half. But at what point does this recurring deadlock, if you will, become a structural problem rather than a temporary crisis?
What's interesting is, I think the characterization of this event in Kosovo has been that it's one of political instability. I would argue in many ways it shows the immense political stability of the country I represent. And here's why I say that. There has been a lack of agreement, unfortunately, from political parties on forming a government, and then a lack of agreement from political parties on electing a consensual president. However, throughout that process of political disagreement, the institutions have worked. Parliament has worked. The Constitutional Court, which has had to weigh in and clarify procedural matters, has worked. And so the big issue in this most recent case was that a 2/3 majority is required to elect the president. So we have a parliament of 120 seats, 80 plus votes will be needed in favor of the new president for that president to be elected. And unfortunately, Kosovo suffers from that which most of the world, or a lot of the world, suffers from today, in that there is political polarization, which is significant. And so that makes it very difficult to achieve this very high number of, let's say, political agreement on president, along with the government. Based on the most recent and several sort of estimates for the result of today's election, it would be very likely that it won't be difficult for Vetëvendosje and Mr. Albin Kurti, the current acting prime minister, to be able to form again a government. So that's not likely in question. The question is really whether there'll be an agreement on president. And I think because there has been this now, the third set of elections, because, you can already see that that's starting to impact the level of the desire for political participation. This is leading, of course, to apathy. People don't want to have to go to the polls again and again and again. I think that the onus now will really be on all the political parties to not, look around and say it is the fault of so and so that we don't have a president, but rather it is my responsibility, perhaps it's so and so's responsibility, and so to come together and create a solution. And let's continue to advance Kosovo on the EU integration path. Let's continue to advance very important bilateral relationships with Kosovo, like that with the US, like that with Poland, which I'm proud to represent. And so I think now is really the time where there'll be elections today and there'll be result of elections, but I think afterwards you'll see that some of the problems that Kosovo was mired in and not having political agreement to come together in the last 18 months, I'm very confident will change and we won't see another snap election. And it's my great hope that the next elections after today on June 7th at the national level will be in 4 years' time at a regular schedule.
Right. So analysts still predict a victory for Albin Kurti. So what explains his continued popularity and what possible coalition scenarios are there?
I think the Prime Minister's popularity has really been based on the fact that, he is first and foremost a reformist Prime Minister. He came to power in the first time, with this reform agenda that's extended, nationally, but also internationally. And that has a great deal of support, in the country. And then, of course, his individual ability plays a big role as well in terms of being able to communicate and garner that support. And that was a great success of the prime ministers, but it was a success, as you kind of alluded to, in tandem with now the former president, Vjosa Osmani. And so I think the prime minister continues to have that support because he's still seen as sort of the best address for reform and development for his country. That being said, the one sort of positive outcome of the multiple elections is that the opposition parties are evolving and changing, I think, for the better. So you see that there are new political figures coming to the fore that are younger, perhaps more innovative and interesting figures across all parties, I think, which provides some hope for the young country. And so, but of course, whomever wins the elections today, very likely Prime Minister Albin Kurti will have to continue to deliver to keep that support and continue to consolidate Kosovo's place in the international stage. We have many challenges, not that discourage us, but that encourage us to really be proactive in order to solve them. We are, I just listened to the segment you had on Maja Halinska. We are in many ways like Maja Halinska. We are a country with a lot of ambition, a lot of hope. We are a great underdog, perhaps, in terms of our national development or European integration, but we are willing to work very hard to achieve what we ought to achieve for our country and triumph like Maja Halinska. So sometimes we don't win the final like Maja, but I think she will win soon, and I'm very confident in our ability as well. And so I'm hoping today that there is a political result that is clear in terms of building the next government, even if there is no coalition government, even if Vetëvendosje is able to secure the ability to govern outright, which is very likely, there will still need to be some sort of political agreement, formal or informal, on the election of a president. And again, my sense is that the parties themselves realize that this is the time to come to that type of agreement. And they sort of have learned much about each other in this, time of kind of discussing several options and weighing several options. And so I think there will be a collective sense that the best thing for Kosovo after these elections is not only a strong government that's able to move forward on reform and integration in the EU, but is one that, can elect a president, can move forward, can be a reliable partner for partners in Europe and beyond the world. And so I'm confident that that realization will be the ultimate result of the elections today.
Mm-hmm. But what does this repeated failure to elect a president reveal about the strengths and weaknesses of Kosovo's institutional design?
I think, you can, if you think about the institutional design, it may be that this 2/3 requirement to elect a president and the fact that there's an indirect election of president, that, the winning coalition government has the onus in terms of making the first proposal, but that has to be an agreement among parties. This, again, in a sort of polarized political environment, this is a hurdle, a big hurdle to overcome. However, it is what it is, and I think, the institutions have worked in the sense that, even amidst disagreement in politics, they have tried to come together, they have met, they have sought to discuss agreement. When they disagreed on the procedure, they went to the Constitutional Court, either Vedvendosya as the majority party or the opposition parties. The Constitutional Court promptly provided responses, presented the way forward, and then parties agreed. They may have disagreed with the verdict in terms of, what their preferences were, but they agreed and implemented the verdicts of the Constitutional Court. So I think in the process of all this disagreement, there's actually a lot of positives to take away. We're very proud of the fact that we consider Kosovo's democracy to be a leading democracy, not only in the Balkans, but beyond that. And this is, seen also by global measures such as Freedom House and many others. I'm forgetting the other very prominent one that we score even better on. But I think we're at the point where we have proven very effectively that we're really, really good at holding elections. But now we're really on point to prove that we can come to an agreement, that we can make decisions that aren't ones in which one side wins entirely, but are ones that certainly our country comes out victorious because we have put aside some of our reservations and sought the most wise way forward, let's say.
Now, the EU continues to call for stronger institutions and reforms. How much leverage does Brussels actually have in Kosovo?
I would say a very considerable amount of leverage. If you think about the countries that are looking to join the EU now, we're in this category of countries that sees no and wants no alternative to EU integration. So 97% of our country is in favor of EU integration. About the same number is in favor as well of NATO integration. So being a part of the common security and defense policy is also very important, and being along with partners such as Poland and others there is very important. But on the EU, of course, a very important actor. We have been waiting since our application for EU membership in December 15, 2022 for official candidate status and for moving forward. What has been cited by the EU as a difficulty is that there are 5 countries that don't yet recognize our independence. However, I would emphasize for your viewers that even in 2016, when we were able to become part of the stabilization and association process, this was done because countries that did not yet establish diplomatic relations with us agreed to let us move forward on our path to EU integration. So we hope that because of the big momentum now that's clear from the EU in terms of bringing countries who are in the Western Balkans, who are in the Eastern Partnership forward to join the EU, that can help in also our own path. We would like a clear path to joining the EU, not a free pass. We are looking to fulfill all the requirements necessary, economic development, political development, rights for, minority groups, additional political criteria. So we want to be held to that standard that's held to everybody else, but we just want the clear path in order to do that. And so I think the recent summit happening now, or had just happened now in Tivat, was another investment in the region. We were very happy as well that Prime Minister Tusk took part in this event to show also Poland's leadership among, I would say, Italy and Austria as the friends of the Western Balkans that had the official title. I think Poland has clearly been that friend as well in terms of supporting merit-based integration for our entire region, not only Kosovo. This is the criteria we would really love to achieve in the not too distant future, is to achieve finally candidate status and be an official candidate to join the EU and to receive the questionnaire on enlargement. As you can imagine, we've already provided or prepared our responses to such questionnaires. So we're looking to move forward as fast as possible in the process, and we hope we can do that because the EU wields a lot of influence, and we don't want any. I wouldn't threaten that there are any alternatives to the EU. There are no alternatives to the EU in Kosovo, but that shouldn't mean that our let's say our application should be left in the in the bin and something we'll get to later. Right. I think even the countries that are very pro EU deserve that push to join the EU, and we hope to do that.
Drilon Gashi, thank you so very much for joining us this morning. Much appreciated.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on the AP World.